today. Of course, our moderator is Mr. Michael Graves, the chairperson and our president of ACT. And of course, we welcome you. We will be sharing for 90 minutes, and we will go in 3 to 4 segments based on the arrival of those candidates. Again, before we go further, let me again invite you, challenge you, urge you to exercise the franchise in voting. People died, bled, dogs bit them, all sorts of things happened so that we could have this right to vote, regardless of who you vote for. Make sure you are voting. We say here at Ebenezer that good Christians are good citizens, and good citizens vote. And whether or not you are a Christian, if you don't have any faith tradition, you are a citizen of this county, and of course, it is your right to vote. All right, here are our ground rules for this evening. Our first component will be Dr. Dorothy Yarborough, who works with our Board of Elections. She and Mr. Graves will dialogue for 15 or so minutes because we want to make sure that you are aware of all of the legalities that goes along with you being a voting citizen. And after that, well, let me just do this while I'm talking. After that, we'll move to our judges, I believe, and our judges will have the time allotted. What would happen is you will have 1 minute for an opening statement, and then, of course, Mr. Graves will ask a question. Everybody will get the same question. You'll have 2 minutes to answer the questions. Of course, Ms. Risha Drumgold, who is assisting me here to do this event, she will be holding up time signs, and if you would please give your attention to her, so when she times you down, because when your time is up, we don't have a mute to put on mics, but when your time is up, we're going to move on to the next person to answer. Once again, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And now we give our attention to Mr. Graves and Dr. Dorothy Yarborough.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough, welcome. Thank you. We're going to start off with some basic questions that a lot of people have concerns about. But first, we'd like to start off with the dates of early vote. When does it start? Well, we know it started then. When does it end? And the voting sites.
Okay. Early voting started on October 15th. And early voting ends Saturday, October the 31st. And the polls will be open on that Saturday from 8 a.m. until 3 o'clock p.m. We have 5 early voting sites. The 5 sites are the Mebane Arts Center, Holly Hill Mall, the County Annex Building, the Conodal Senior Activities Center, and the Elmira Community Center.
Okay, one of the main questions that I have been asked, can people take, if they have a ballot, can they take it to the early vote site to turn that ballot in?
Yes, they can, but they must wait in line like everyone else.
Okay.
Because we have to record the absentee ballots that are turned in. So yes, they can bring them to that site, but they have to stand in line. So if they don't want to stand in line, probably the quickest way to do it is to take it to the Board of Elections in Graham.
And the hours for that, for the Board of Elections?
The Board of Elections is open at the same time that voting. They will be there, but the regular hours are 8 to 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you need a ID to vote?
No.
All right. If for some reason...
But then let me say this.
Okay.
There could be an unusual circumstance where you may give an address that is not the address that's listed, and so they may ask to see an ID or something to show that you are that person and that you reside at that particular address, because sometimes people have not changed their address, and so when they come, they give one address, and then another address may be listed.
Would that require a provisional ballot?
They can get a provisional ballot, and what they will do is they will then bring a utility bill or something with their name and their current address on it to the Board of Elections.
Okay. If for some reason a person's ballot is set aside for whatever reason, would that person know about that ballot being set aside? Would they be contacted?
When you say set aside,
A lot of people have been getting calls about, and actually it made the national news, about ballots not being counted or being thrown out. And, well, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'll allow you to finish your question.
And ballots being thrown out. If a ballot is thrown out for whatever reason, will that person be contacted to fix that ballot or given the opportunity to fix that ballot?
You see, everything that happens on the news does not happen in North Carolina, neither does it happen in Alamance County. If you have an absentee ballot and something is wrong with the absentee ballot, that person is notified. So that is after the board has seen the ballot. So that means they will receive a phone call, they will receive a certificate, which is a letter from the Board of Elections. The letter explains that there is something missing. It describes in detail what is missing from there, and it's not the ballot, it's usually the envelope. So it describes what is missing from that particular envelope. For example, the witness may not have signed it, or the voter did not sign it. They did not put their address on there. So they receive what is called a certificate. The certificate has a letter. It explains what is wrong. It tells them what they can do, and it also tells them when they must have the correction back to the Board of Elections. Now, the person can do one or two things. They can make the correction and send it back to the Board of Elections, or they can elect to go vote in person. They can't do both. Yes. So they are notified.
Okay, so if, because some people have been receiving phone calls from different agencies saying that your ballot has been thrown out. So if they don't receive a call from the Board of Elections
Of Alamance County, that's right, they should ignore it, because no one will have their ballot except for the Board of Elections here in Alamance County.
Okay. There were some concerns about people open carrying guns at voting sites.
Mm-hmm.
Is that permitted by the law?
What we do, or what we are doing, is you follow the policy of that facility. If it's the city facility, or if we were here at Ebenezer and it said no firearms, then you follow that policy.
Okay, so if a person has a question concerning that or basically anything, the best thing for them to do is contact the Board of Elections.
Call the Board of Elections. Mm-hmm. And the Board of Elections will check, as they did with one of the other cases. Yes.
Okay. So if a person has not signed their ballot, or the ballot it had not been witnessed by a person, that will be, I guess, a good word would be flagged by the board, and then that person will be contacted. Will that be before November the 3rd?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They are being contacted now, so that they will have an opportunity to vote between now and November the 3rd. The letter does state that if they choose to correct the ballot themselves, it does have a date, and the date has November 12th on there, that they must have it back into the Board of Elections.
Okay. Could you give the Board of Elections number, and if there's anything else that you think the voters of Alamance County need to know, could you express that?
Well, the Board of Elections is on Maple Street, next door to the sheriff's office. That's the best way to tell you where the Board of Elections is. One of the questions I think a call that we had gotten was what happens to your ballot if the machines go down at the site? Now, and we have had that to happen. We have new machines, but like anything else, something can happen. And so the people were told that if they did not want to wait until the machines were, until the scanner was back up, they could put their ballot in a slot. Some people thought it was a shredder. It is not a shredder. It's an emergency slot for ballots if the scanner, and sometimes the scanner may get jammed. So they can put it in there. Now, do we know that those ballots are in that scanner? We know the ballots are in the scanner because when the scanner is secured, which means the chief judge has to unlock that slot. So when that slot is unlocked, the scanner knows it is unlocked, and we're putting a ballot in there. So when they tabulate at the end, the numbers aren't going to match if you do not take those ballots out of that slot and then scan them in. So that's how you get an accurate read. So if 10 people put their ballots in that slot because something happened to the scanner while they were voting, we will know, because they will have to take those 10 ballots out, scan them in, or at the end of the evening, their numbers will not tally.
Another question that I had personally, because nationally there's a lot of questions about official ballot boxes. Are there any official ballot boxes in Alamance County?
None. We have no ballot boxes in Alamance County.
So if someone says that I can take your ballot and put it in this box, you just basically throwing your vote away because there's no official ballot box.
First of all, you shouldn't give your ballot to anyone unless it's the person who witnessed it, which would be a family member, and if you don't have a family member, or a close friend, or whoever witnessed your ballot. So you shouldn't give your ballot to anyone. And when I talked about, and another way that a person will be notified that their ballot has not been counted is sometimes the ballots may come in an envelope that is not an official envelope. We have to have the official envelope because that's where the signatures are. Okay, so we need that's why we need the state-issued envelope. If that envelope is open, the Board of Elections, we cannot count it because we don't know what else is in there or who may have, or if you actually completed it and put the ballot in yourself. So the best thing to do is to ask you to do it again because that envelope was not sealed.
One quick last question, especially for those who may have underlying health issues or our seniors who will be voting. What practices are being, have the Board of Election put in place to protect voters from the COVID virus?
Well, if you're going to stand in line or if you're going on the inside, we certainly have the necessary PPE. We have the hand sanitizers. We certainly have face masks. We ask that when you use a pen, it's your souvenir, you take it with you. And for those who are doing curbside voting, we do the same thing. You have a face mask. Every poll worker must wear a face mask. We ask that all voters wear a face mask as well.
Okay. Are there any other concerns that you may have?
Well, the citizens probably would like to know, as of yesterday, we had over 24,000 people who have already voted, and that's in person. We have approximately 10,000 absentee ballots that have been tabulated. Now, when I say tabulated, that does not mean we know for whom they voted, because we do not know for whom they voted. Neither do we know which parties have voted, because that is not something we look at. We find that out the same time you find that out. But we do know, we have to know the numbers every day. So we are at 24,000 as of yesterday, and 10,000 as of Tuesday for absentee ballots. A lot of people ask us, well, which parties? Well, let me tell you. North Carolina has 5 recognized parties. And I don't know how many people know that, because we have the Constitution Party, we have the Democratic Party, we have the Green Party, we have the Libertarian Party, and the Republican Party. So I have not a clue as to which party these 24,000 people belong. Neither do we look at that when we are looking at absentee ballots.
So again, if anybody is receiving phone calls concerning your ballot, if it's not from the Board of Election, it is not valid.
Right. And if you're doing absentee ballots, you can always go on the state website and you can track your ballot. This time, for the first time, the state has a way for you to track your absentee ballot from the time it leaves your home until the time it gets to the Board of Elections in Graham. So you can track that by going on, and it's called Ballot Track. And if you don't use Ballot Track, you can also use a search tool, and you can find both of these on the State Board of Elections website. If you need assistance, you can call the Alamance County Board of Elections, and they can tell you how to get on that website.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Yarborough.
You're quite welcome.
Thank Dr. Yarborough for her fine presentation. At this moment, we're going to take a small break so we can move chairs around and get ready for our candidates for district judge. Thank you again, Dr. Yarborough.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. You won't mind? Mic check.
We're back. We're back now, ready for our second group. Thanks to Dr. Yarbrough for a fine presentation. Now we turn to those who are running for our district judge. To my right, we have Mr. Rick Champion. To my left, Mr. Doug Green. And once again, if you all will take off your mask or pull down your mask so that people can see you, so they can identify who's who. For your opening statement, you'll have 1 minute for opening statement. And then, of course, Mr. Graves will begin to ask questions. You will have 2 minutes to answer each question. And we ask that you would put back on your mask because we want to make sure that you're safe and that you will not charge us for giving you COVID. Because if you do, then we're going to deny you over here. Just kidding. All right? That's bad for a preacher to say. So at this point, I turn it over to Mr. Graves.
Again, thank you, Dr. Covington. We are now going to start our 30 minutes with the candidates for the judge for District 15A. To my left is Mr. Doug Green. To my right is Mr. Rick Champion. We're going to start with opening statements, 1 minute each, and we'll start with Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. I'm going to take this time just to introduce myself. My name is Doug Green. I was born and raised here in Alamance County in a small little area in Burlington called Morrowtown. I was an honor student and all-state football player from Williams High School. I got my BA degree from Duke University. I went on to get my master's in business administration from Elon College at the time, now Elon University. And then I went on and got my Juris Doctorate from North Carolina Central University School of Law. After that, I have over 20 years of civil and criminal trial experience. I'm active in our community. I'm on the board of the Alamance County Community Service Agency. I'm also a part of the Morrowtown Community Group, which is charged with revitalizing that little area, as well as I help Pastor Edwards at the Dream Center with children, going and speaking with them as well. And I have 2 children, ages 15 and 12, and I love them dearly. Thank you.
Mr. Champion.
Well, my name is Rick Champion. I was born and raised in Durham County. I worked my way through college farming, doing construction work, and working in restaurants. That's how I got through. I played football, but I was not nearly as talented as Mr. Green. I went to North Carolina. There in Chapel Hill. In 4 years, I graduated, then went to North Carolina Central School of Law, and got my first job down east as an assistant DA in 1984. From there, in 1987, I moved to Burlington and made this my home. I have 2 grown children, Erica and Zach. They live in Charlotte and Greensboro, and then I have 2 younger children, Brennan and Ty. They were both on the Williams High School State Championship men's soccer team. I'm very proud of them. And I'm very proud of my wife, Kelly. I've been protecting constitutional rights for 36 years as a trial lawyer, either victims of crimes as a DA, and in 20 years of private practice as a court-appointed attorney and retained attorney in criminal court. And thank you.
We're going to try to alternate the questions. Again, these questions are 2 minutes. And we're going to start with you, Mr. Champion. Is there any inherent racism in the judicial system? And if so, what can be done to fix it? And what can you do personally to make sure there's equity in the system?
Well, Mike, I'd be ridiculous if I said no. We all, in our hearts, or at least my heart, don't want to be racist or prejudiced toward anybody. I've raised my children not to be prejudiced. I've done my best to correct my way of raising. My upbringing in the 60s was a lot different than my children's upbringing in the 90s. And I hope that I have learned from their growth and what they've taught me, and I hope that I can spread that into the judicial system. Poverty is just as much a prejudice I see in the courts as race. I mean, I think there are poor white and other there are minorities that are poor, and I see if there's any injustice, I see that they probably, it's more affected there than just race. I do know that there are some, did she say? I thought she said something. I do know that there has been racist tactics, and I won't tolerate that kind of police work. I think it's not as prevalent as maybe the more recent newsworthy events have caused. I think a lot of officers try their best to be as fair as they can, but they've got to make split-second decisions and often very hostile situations. And me personally, I'm not racist, I'm not biased, but I wasn't raised as an African American either, so I don't know how that life is. I just know that I have to work on myself every day. And I think listening to other people's stories and how they have been affected will help me to be a fair judge no matter what your race or your socioeconomic background.
Okay, and just so everybody will know, because I've been in that position, been a candidate, and been in these forums, the timekeeper will let you know when there's a minute, and she'll let you know when there's 30 seconds. It should be a minute and 30 seconds there. Okay, well, 30 seconds. And so you won't be told off. Yes. Okay. Mr. Green, same question.
There is no doubt that there is some systemic racism in the judicial system. Now, and that's because we have individuals on the bench. Okay, and they come from various backgrounds, and normally from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and on up till today, you have quite a few white men who are older, who were born in those times. So yes, there is systemic racism within our judicial system. Now, how do we curb that? Is that when you have to vote for an individual to be on the bench that you feel is has that fundamental fairness within themselves. And how I couch that and how I present that is that my parents taught me a lot of things, but they taught me two things. They taught me, one, to respect, to work hard, and two, to respect people. Now, as I grew up here in Alamance County, I'm not here to say that there wasn't inequities. I'm not here to say that there wasn't discrimination. But as I was going through high school, I had friends of all different races. I was able to go to their houses. I was able to spend the night, eat at their table, and I always treated their parents, because my parents would have certainly disciplined me, with respect, and I got respect back. When I went to Duke University, we had people from all over the world as students at Duke University, so you had to interact with all those different cultures. And so you learn to, one, have that fundamental respect for someone, and you learn not to prejudge someone at that point in time. And then, of course, outside of college, I've traveled the United States, and again have been have experienced and interacted with different cultures. And so for me, it's inherent just from my parents and from how I was brought up here in Alamance County. I have that fundamental fairness inside of me, and so when someone comes into my courtroom, you will be treated fairly and with respect.
Again, back to you, Mr. Green. With the COVID virus and a basic or simple sentence of 30 days could be a death sentence in the jail with the COVID outbreak that we have had at the Alamance County Detention Center. Are there any sentencing options that you would put in place at a time during the pandemic if you was elected?
Thank you, Mr. Graves. You know, as a district court judge, as you said, you know, we deal with misdemeanors, and so you're right, we're mostly dealing with days instead of months and months if we do sentence someone. So I believe that when someone has pled guilty, or as a district court judge in the criminal system, we have found someone guilty, we need to obviously look at their record, look at the crime that has been committed. And so if it is something where we can get someone help, so instead of putting them in jail for 30 days, as you indicated, maybe we can send him to a rehab facility, or place them on probation and make sure that they have a job, or it may be a mental problem. We may need to go give them some mental help. And so those are the things that I would look at and I would put in place instead of, in this particular era where there is COVID-19, instead of sending someone into jail, I would look at all those factors, and if I can help, and if their record warrants it, that's more than likely what they'll get.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Well, the COVID-19 coronavirus is a serious concern. Fortunately, the number of deaths as a result are very small in comparison to the number of people that are contracted, thank goodness. People that are sentenced to jail in a criminal court are repeat offenders, or they are people that have, again, repeat offenders in impaired driving situations or domestic violence situations. Sometimes a judge is left with no recourse. Certainly all the programs to address mental health are important. My motto is seek justice first, love mercy, and walk humbly with my God. And that's what I'll try to do when I talk to people in my court, when I judge them in my court. I'm judging their actions and not them as a person, but I would try my best to garner a punishment that would give them hope to change the problems that they have. Now, we can't give them jobs, but probation requires you to have a job if you can find one. But there are all these kinds of things that we can work toward. There are a lot of resources to try to use before just, like you say, putting someone in the jail for 30 days. Sometimes it's more than that if the crime warrants it. But I won't hesitate when punishment is required. Sometimes a parent has to be tougher when the kid won't listen. And when the defendant before you continues to make the same mistakes, assault the same woman over and over again, or keeps driving impaired, you have no choice, Mr. Graves, but to be hard. And we have to hope that the jail will continue their fight to keep the jail clean and to protect the inmates and separate the ones that test positive. They have weekly testing now, I think, there to try to help that, as you know, working there. Thank you.
Some, as you may or may not know, ACT is partnering, putting on this forum, and ACT is actively changing together, which is a program that's, amongst other things, work with the prisoners in the jail. Since I've been working with the prisoners in the jail for about a year and a half, going on 2 years, I have a good working relationship with the past DA, with Pat, and with the current DA, Sean. I brought to his attention some inmates that have been in the jail. One gentleman that I'm working with has been in the jail for 4 years. Again, now his is a felony, which I know would not come before you, but there are others who have been in jail long past the times that they would be sentenced to, 30 days, some have been in there 6 months. What can you do as a judge as far as scheduling to help move the calendar along faster than it is?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. I have said this repeatedly when I've been at different events and we were allowed to go to them, that maybe I don't work smart, but I work hard. And if I'm honored to get this position as your next district court judge, if you're expected to be in court at 9 o'clock, this judge will be on the bench at 9 o'clock, even if it's to make a simple decision about continuances. And I'll make sure that our bailiffs will keep me up to date while I'm in the criminal court and not civil court, keep me up to date on who's there and who's been there too many days unable to make bond. The new bond policy is much more lenient. Is that the right word? I mean, there are a lot of people on the misdemeanor list that may not have to post a cash bond. But for decades now, we've had a liaison with the jail and the court that takes names. He doesn't go around and try to represent people. He gets names of people that want to come over and plead guilty sometimes to misdemeanors. And if they've been in court and they don't want to plead guilty, at some point the judge needs to review their bond. When I was on the court-appointed list for more than 20 years, I spent a lot of hours in that jail, letting my client know what's going on with his case or her case, and trying my best to get him out on bond if I could. We've had judges in this county, Mike, you may know that you file a bond reduction notice, they might jack it up. We've had that kind of practice here in Alamance County, so I would always try to caution and advise my clients the wisdom of those kinds of actions. But as a judge, you know, the jail staff, the bailiffs, they know who's been there so long. The misdemeanors sometimes are days, and we can handle those things efficiently if the defendants and their families will communicate that they want to be seen by a judge if they haven't seen their lawyer for a long time. So I had a victim tell me that recently on a felony case that she's not mad with her sister anymore and she would like to work it out. I said, well, your sister needs to tell their lawyers to contact me because they can't find her. So you have to have that kind of communication sometimes. Thank you.
Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mr. Graves. What we can put in place, first of all, we all have to remember that when you are charged with a crime, they're just allegations. Because in this country, we are presumed innocent. So we first have to begin there. And then there are situations where there may have to be a bail set and a secured bail where that person may not meet that particular bail. However, in district court, that's where most of the criminal cases start. And so, you do have to monitor that. In other words, they're charged with a crime, they've been arrested, they've been jailed, and maybe given a bond that they can't make. And so you have to force, at some point, that superior court district attorney to say, okay, either you're going to indict this, or we're going to get rid of this, or somehow we're going to handle this down here in district court, because he's been in jail longer, way too long at this particular time. So, because I've had that happen to me with a district court judge. They kind of set a limit on me and say, by the next time you need to have him indicted. If not, we're going to handle it here. And so I think that doing that as far as a policy, as well as, again, the current bail system. With district court, we're dealing mostly with misdemeanors. And so with those low-level misdemeanors, we're mostly given written promises to appear. So far in the 3 months, I think that 3 or 4 months that this has been going on, I have not seen them not come to court on those written promises to appear. So we have to continue to look at this, analyze it on a case-by-case basis. And again, at some times we may have to force the hand of the Superior Court district attorney so that we can move these cases and keep someone from not being in jail an extended period of time.
This question starts with you, Mr. Green, and keeping in line with that train of thought, I can assure both of you gentlemen that the court liaison system is not working. I work with these individuals every day, and if it was not for the relationship that I have with your current boss, Sean, and the previous DA, with these individuals saying they are wanting to plead guilty but cannot get a hold to their defense attorneys, that happens every day. They want to see a judge, they want to get out of jail, they want to plead guilty, and they still can't get in front of a judge. Is there anything that you can do as a district court judge along those lines as far as the defense attorney is concerned to get these people in front of a judge?
Is there anything I can do for, as far as a defense attorney in getting
Yes.
if it's in district court and we have that case before us and before me, I can certainly make sure that that defense attorney is in court, and unless he's on secured leave or something. But if he's available, we're going to make sure he gets into court, and we're going to see if we can handle this particular case. And I've seen the emails from our boss, Sean Boone, with the names of people who want to maybe either plea or at least have their case before a district court judge. It may even be helpful if we were able to get that to where maybe we can send something out to the defense attorney and go, hey, this guy is in jail and he wants his case handled. Let's get him into court as quickly as possible, because in district court, although they have their different days, we can just bring them in. We just bring them from the jail. So I think we need to have that communication and that line to these defense attorneys to where we can call them and say, hey, let's get this guy in the court, because I know it's happened to me as a superior court attorney. Hey, you get a call from the judge and say, hey, we got this guy down here. We need to come handle this case.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Champion.
Well, I think it goes back to my earlier statement that as a judge, I'm going to be on the bench at 9 o'clock. And when we get back to regular schedules where everybody's there at 9 o'clock instead of spread out during the day, depending on which defense attorney is involved in your case, I think the judge has a lot of power to make sure to make sure that the attorneys that represent folks, especially in jail, are there to handle the case. It doesn't take but 1 to 2 chewing outs from a judge as a defense attorney before you get your act together. And it doesn't take but 1 or 2 phone calls from the state bar to say, why aren't you taking care of your clients? No judge wants to have to do that, but to make the courts work efficiently, a district court judge, sometimes a judge has to say no. And sometimes when that state needs another continuance for that probable cause hearing, or another continuance for that DUI, or another continuance to get that witness in to testify against the defendant, whether he's in jail or not, sometimes a judge has just got to say no. And I just think over the years, it's just kind of the judges have just been too lenient, not only with defense attorneys. Believe me, for 20-some years, I begged for many of them. And I did my best when my clients didn't want to face the music. But at the same token, the state has to be put under the same kind of pressure from the judge. You got to get your act together too. If Officer Jones is not going to come to court, this is the 3rd time. It's time to do something with this case, and because this man is losing work. This lady is losing work. You got to remember that. And so that's what I would do. You just guys got to have the leadership ability, so those attorneys will know that you mean business when you tell them to come to court. Now, there are 5 courts going at one time. Lawyers can't be but one place at once. So there's always exceptions, but just continuance after continuance after continuance. And that's what I saw when I took over a caseload in January of last year in the felony. Cases were 3 years old and they've never been indicted, Mr. Graves. Those are felony cases. But the district attorney at the time and his staff were not forced to go to the grand jury. And that's what drug it out. The district court judge could stop that by saying, case dismissed.
Well, we'll let both of you gentlemen know, as I let your boss know, it really, to me, is injustice for the individuals that's in jail. Because, again, everybody that's there is not guilty, and even the ones that are there that are guilty, they deserve their day in court, and they're not getting it. Cash bail. Cash bail. Can you give me your opinion on cash bail, and when a attorney and an inmate come in front of you to discuss maybe bond reduction or a bond, what goes into your determination in setting that amount?
Foremost, we got to look to protect the public. So what is the person charged with? Did they shoplift a pack of cigarettes, or did they beat their spouse or their partner severely? In district court, those are going to be our more serious cases. Did they abuse their child? Did they neglect their child? as a judge, I think you've got to look at that. Cash bail is important. I know this isn't a popular statement to say, but I've been doing this 36 years. If the person who has the accusations are all let out on written promises to appear, it does look like we're honoring the theory of our justice system that you're innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, you've got to make sure there's a stake to assure that person comes to court. For that victim, the victim is entitled to quick justice, and they're entitled to safety as well during the pendency of the trial. One of the things that, after talking to Mr. Boone, when I came on with the DA's office again in January, was we have a really strong domestic violence and family abuse program in our county, very strong. But the injustice I saw as a defense attorney, sometimes we want to postpone as long as we can because that may wear down the victim's will to come in and testify. They're already afraid of the person. But it was an injustice that when they had the first appearance on setting the bail, the victim's case is put off not a few weeks or a month, but sometimes 3 months down the road. And then another continuance is 6 months old. Now, if somebody's still in jail on a misdemeanor charge that long, I would hope that a new system with the jail and a judge keeping track of the jail list and how many days someone's been, that will come into play too to try to get someone over, not to force them to plead guilty, because a lot of times that's what happened. But cash bail is important, and we don't want it so that people are forced to plead guilty just to get out of jail. But it's just to assure the protection of the people in the public that were the victims, and to make sure, look, they got, not only do they have they don't want to get rearrested for not being in court, but you want to make sure there might be a financial risk for the family that got them out. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
I just want to make sure I get the question right. Is that, what are we considering when we're determining or
Bond reduction.
bond
or
reductions?
amount.
Okay. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis, but what I know I would consider is the crime charged. You look at his record, and then there are certain determinations you do have to make. Has he had a history of not appearing in court? When this crime that he's in court today was committed, then, was he already out on bond for a previous crime? Then we need to look at, is there a threat to the community? Is there a threat that he or she may destroy evidence? Is there, will that become harm to the community? Is there a harm to that individual? And those things do play a significant role in considering, okay, does this person deserve a unsecured bond or a secured bond? Now, when you're coming up with the amount, I think that's what I heard as well, the amount. Again, it really is the seriousness of the crime. I think what we have in place now, especially at the district court level, with the misdemeanors, again, if they're not those serious misdemeanors where it's assault on a female or assault with a deadly weapon, those sort of things, then I think we go to what has been that was in the agreement that was made out back in starting July 1st, is that you need to look at that person's income. Okay, what kind of income do you have? And then I think based on their income, again, if it's something that I'm going to give a secured bond with, that is what I need to look at to make sure, okay, I'm not making sure that I'm not doing something that's going to have this person stay in jail. He needs, again, it's presumed innocent. Let's give him an opportunity to afford that he can make bond, and so he can get out and then come to court.
Okay. This is our last question before wrap up. Starting with you, Mr. Green, dealing that you will be in the district court, you'll be dealing with a lot of, misdemeanors. And a lot of the misdemeanors usually arrive from people dealing or using drugs. If inmate comes up in front of you with a problem of drugs or a history with a problem with drugs, could you see yourself sentencing, or what type of guidelines would you have to operate by? Could you see yourself sentencing that person to maybe rehab? Is that an option?
Yes. To answer your question directly, that is an option. But again, we need to look at the history. And one of the things that a lot of times that I've seen, we've criminalized addictive behavior. And we see the people coming into court that have have an alcohol problem, a drug problem, or there could be a mental health problem. So in some instances, we need to stop criminalizing this addictive behavior. Now, again, in district court, we're dealing with misdemeanors. Certainly, we need to look, again, at the crime, okay? And then we need to look at the history. And if it's something where, this is their first offense, or maybe even their first or second offense, that is something that we need to consider. But if it is something that has just been progressively, all these misdemeanor larcenies, time after time after time, at some point you do have to say, okay, enough's enough. You may can dry out in jail for 30 days or 120 days, whatever it may call for. But if there is that instance where you see that this individual needs help, I feel it is we need to get that person help so that they will not come back into court. Now, we also see that situation where they come into court and they're like, well, I've reached out to this rehab facility. Well, you should have thought about that beforehand, in my opinion. I won't take that into account. I'll go back to let's look at the crime, let's look at your record, and let's see if there is something that we can help you with. But again, if it's something that is that's been a constant year after year, then like I said, sometimes you got to go to jail for a little bit.
Mr. Champion?
Wished I had the answer to that question. I think that would be a wonderful gift to have. I think alcohol and drug addiction, drug use or consumption, unfortunately, we don't have enough programs to address those things. If you're wealthy or you've got good insurance, maybe you can get your child into this, or maybe you can get your child into that kind of program. But the ones that are really effective are extremely expensive under the current state of our society. That's unfortunate. As a defense attorney, I always tried to convince the district attorney and the court to accept non-traditional types of rehab or treatment rather than, okay, go to task, go to this thing, and you just sit around and talk about how many times you got high last night. There are a lot of faith-based organizations in this community. I don't know how many, maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but there have been some in the past that I've had clients that were able to use something from their church, from their family's church, that was able to get them on the right road, because it's a day-to-day decision. Their depression or whatever it is that's causing them to seek into this addiction and reliance on these substances, it's more to it than what a judge can say. Now, don't you do this anymore, or pay this $100 fine and don't do it again. It takes more. It takes more of the community to be involved in with it, because, like I said, the professional organizations are really expensive. I will always try to give them hope that you can do this. You can make that decision. It's not going to be easy. I'll try to give them hope, and I'll try to be receptive, again, to non-traditional task programs or those kinds of things, and accept that as successful completion of certain programs. The legislature gets, all right, we are kind of limited on that, but that's how I would try to approach it.
Our last question, and this is our wrap up. So we're going to give 2 minutes for this. And we're starting with you, Mr. Championson. We started with Mr. Green with the opening statement. Why should we vote for you?
Well, if you want someone that I have lived some of the lives, some of the problems that my clients had. And but for the grace of God, I may have been in their shoes. I was very fortunate growing up. I've had a lot of blessings in my life, and I got a law degree. I don't know how I did it. I mean, I really don't. But I've never thought it made me better than anybody else. And I've always tried to talk to my clients like that. I tried to tell them my experiences and how they need to change. And as your judge, I just hope that you trust me. I mean, for 20 years as I'm a defense attorney, not just a prosecutor, but as a defense attorney in criminal court, I've been in that jail to try to interview you in that little room. There were only 3 rooms and now maybe 1 room. I mean, I've done it. I've had to wait. I've had to see my clients so that they can have trust in my decisions or recommendations for just big decisions they have to make in their lives. I hope that they trust me, that I would be that same kind of caring and thoughtful person on the bench, and I can only promise you that I will be that person. I'll be genuine. I may have to wear a black robe if I'm elected, but that doesn't mean that I'm not the same person on the inside. And I've been there, and I know what it's like to work at night. I know what it's like to work for minimum wage just to try to put gas in my car to go back and forth to school. I know what that's like. And I will take my experiences and put them to work on the bench to try to be realistic with the people before me. And in civil case, we didn't talk much about civil case, but these divorce cases are dragging out too long too. I think judges need to be tougher over there, getting those things resolved as well. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Champion. Mr. Green?
Thank you, and thank you, Rick. And before I begin, I just want to wish my opponent a happy birthday today, and the happiest of birthdays and many, many more. But the reason I think I want you to vote for me is that I have extensive experience in both criminal and civil. For a good many years, when I first began practicing law, I did all civil practice. So I bring that experience to the court as well as the criminal system, as being a criminal attorney, both as a defense attorney, as a prosecutor. I bring that experience will bring that experience to the bench. And as I've mentioned, I have the life experiences of dealing with many types of people. I've been fortunate enough, to have the ability to talk to several different types of people. And I've told people I've been in the boardroom, and I know people who have, whose life may not have turned out the way they wanted to, and I've been there too, and early on in life, struggling, trying to get my foot on the ground. And having that ability to relate to people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds as well as races, I think gives me that qualification to be a judge and to be able to sit on that district court judge bench and to, again, respect that individual, give that individual an opportunity to be heard, and to treat that individual fairly and equally under the law. So that would be how I would say, I would want your vote, and that would be the one that you would need on the bench.
Thank you, Mr. Green. We have come to the conclusion of our forum for the North Carolina District Court Judge District 15A, Seat 3. Again, Mr. Doug Green to my left and Mr. Rick Champion to my right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, both gentlemen. And at this time, we're going to take a small break to switch out chairs. We're going to ask Mr. Champion and Mr. Green to come back and take their chairs with them. But leave the mic. We'll be back in just a moment.
adjust it on the fly.
You're gonna adjust it on the fly.
Yes, sir. All right.
That's right. I'm the assistant to that.
Company called, thank you. Company called Bowtie. That's where I buy a lot of bow ties. I don't have a tie on at all tonight. I do.
I'm Pastor Covington, and this is our last segment for this evening so that you can get ready to go home and watch the presidential debate from Nashville, Tennessee, Belmont University. But prior to that, we're happy to introduce the four of the six candidates that are running for county commissioner. Mr. Graves will go through, of course, our introductions, but again, 1 minute opening statement, 2 minutes to answer questions, and all candidates will be asked the same question. Please pay attention to Ms. Missouri Daphne Crawley. She is our timekeeper, and of course we'd ask that she would stop when you hear her say time or when you see your time is up. We cannot mute the mic, so we would ask that you would do so we can keep things running smoothly. At this time, Mr. Mike Graves.
Again, thank you, Dr. Covington. This is, as Dr. Covington stated, this is our last dance, if you would say, and this is our county commissioners. And we will start with the introductions. We're going to start to my left, and we're going to start with Ms. Powers and work our way around to Mr. Byrd. Ms. Powers, you have 1 minute.
Thank you for having me. My name is Kristen Powers. I'm one of the Democratic nominees for the Alamance County Board of Commissioners. I am super excited to be here. One of the first things we did as part of our campaign was do a community survey to better understand the needs of the community. And the top 3 issues mentioned were education, which includes school buildings, racism and discrimination, as well as living wages and access to safe and secure housing. I work at a nonprofit to support formerly incarcerated women. And it's really an honor to be here. I miss coming out to Ebenezer during the church services, and hopefully we'll be able to do so again. And again, my name is Kristen Powers for County Commissioner. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. I'm Pamela Thompson. I am serving my second year on the school board out. That'll be over next month. I am married to Craig Thompson. He's a criminal attorney for a long time in Alamance County. I have 3 children. One daughter is a zookeeper in Asheboro. My second daughter is a school teacher in Randolph County, and my son just got out of the Army in July. And I'm very proud of all of them. I work with domestic violence and sexual assault victims for many, many years, and now for the last 3 years I've been working with drug addiction. And I am just very excited to be running for county commissioner. This is a tremendous step for me, and I'm excited to be here, very thankful to be here.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Paisley.
I am John Paisley. I've lived here with my wife of 47 years. We have 4 children, 6 grandchildren, an additional one on the way. I'm a graduate of Elon College with a business and accounting major. Wake Forest Law School, so my Juris Doctorate is from Wake Forest, and I've been practicing law here for, well, this month completes 47 years. I've been a county commissioner previously, and I'm the only candidate of the 6 that are running now that went down on taxes but increased the supplement and the monies for our school system. With all the kids I've got, and Joyce and I, and so forth, Joyce taught for 42 years. Education is extremely important to me and obviously to all of you. And I will do everything I can to increase the likelihood that our children will succeed, at the same time looking after your tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paisley. Mr. Byrd.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Byrd, and I'm running for one of the 3 open seats for the Alamance County Board of Commissioners. Since arriving here over 4 decades ago, I've been passionate about Alamance County, and I've tried to do my part to make sure that this community is a great place for everybody to live, work, and play. And I've done that through my career, 35 years at Alamance Regional Medical Center, and my service on a number of community boards and committees and initiatives dealing with public education and health and mental health and racial equity and the arts and our youth and the elderly and economic development and many more things. So I decided to run in 2014 for the Board of Commissioners because I served on the Vision Plan Committee of the school system, and I realized if I were a commissioner, I could make a real difference for our kids and our teachers and our schools. So I ran and I won, and I'm very proud of my work as a commissioner in support of public education and many other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. The first question we'll begin with Ms. Powers. It is the most pressing thing, I think, at this moment in this community, the statue. Should the statue stay or should it go? If so, what options would you have for the statue if you wish to take it down?
Yeah, so regarding the statute, I mean, right now there's a lot of discussion about the legality that the commissioners have to move it, whether it's a state decision, whether it's a governor's decision. And so I think a lot of the questions about how it could be removed could change potentially depending on the election of the state legislature and the governor's race. That being said, I've made it clear as my personal opinion that I do not agree with the location of the statue being in front of a supposed place of justice. I've talked to many people who feel like they're already discounted going in because of their identity and walking past something to them that represents a sign of a darker past. And so I don't mind if the statue goes into a museum. It can be contextualized, go to more of a memorial site like a cemetery, where it can be, people can go and celebrate their ancestors there, but I don't think it should be in front of a place like a courthouse in the square of Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Ms. Thompson?
Well, let me just say, the line of work I do, I interview people at the jail and at the office that have really made some bad choices. And before I can ever help them, I've got to really figure out why. Why are you making this choice? Usually repeat constantly like a revolving door. And I look at that statue as the very same thing, because there it stands. What it represents to some is horrendous. What it represents to others is still horrendous. And it's got a lot of history to it. But before I would ever touch that piece of rock, I've got to figure out, and we've all got to figure out, what it is that makes it hated so much. Because in any kind of problem, any kind of situation, in the worst domestic violence relationship, there are 2 sides to everything. And you have to deal with both sides and own your part of that side before you can move forward. So I'm about for facilitating an open conversation and speaking with each other instead of at each other. I've seen people yell at each other, say the most horrible, venomous things come out of their mouth, both sides, and it gets you nowhere except matter. And I really have watched this, and there's a lot of outside activity that's coming in to instigate this problem, and that's so unfair to our great county. And I just think we've got to really figure out what it is, because if all we want to do is win, we're never going to solve that until there's a really vast healing on both sides of people who have been offended and hurt from whatever reason that is. If you just move it, you're going to move the problem, and we've got to solve the problem. And I, as an official, can't fix anything. I can't fix your heart, but I can be a great example of how we can work together to do that. And sometimes it has to be a completely outside person who's totally objective, that doesn't have a bias toward either side, because you have to look at yourself first before you can ever stop blaming others.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Paisley?
Thank you. That's a troubling problem. I am not, at this point, in favor of moving the monument. George Santiantos said, and then repeated by Churchill and many, many other world leaders, if you fail to study history, you will be doomed to repeat it. We do not need to repeat slavery. We do not need to repeat the way people were treated on both sides during the Civil War. That was a terrible time in history, and we do not want to repeat that. We do need to remember that history. We cannot go around renaming streets that were named after famous people. We cannot go around renaming Washington, D.C., because George Washington owned slaves. We must study history. We must do so much more so than we have in the past in our schools. And I just believe that people need to be tolerant of each other. The monument, as Pam has, or as Ms. Thompson just indicated, is a piece of rock. It means various things to various people. We've got to be understanding of all sides, and I, at this point, don't feel that's our most important problem. COVID, our school system, there are so many other issues that are so much more important than that statute. Thank you.
Mr. Byrd?
Thank you, Mr. Graves. This issue is a very contentious one, and because of that, I think that the emotions are so high on either side, and we have demonstrations and protests, and I think we're putting ourselves at risk for some real serious bad things to happen to people over that statue. This issue has come up a few times when I served on the Board of Commissioners, and I put a lot of thought into it and a lot of research. I talked to a lot of people. I read a lot of articles. I even went back to the Alamance Gleaner, which covered the ceremony when that statue was dedicated. And I came to the conclusion in 2017 that it would be best if the statue was moved for lots of good reasons. I just mentioned one. But, you know, that statue, I recognize that it represents a lot of sacrificed lives that were lost during the Civil War. But based on my research, I know that that statue also represents a celebration of white supremacy. And that was the mindset, the popular mindset of white people at the time when it was erected. You think about when it was erected and the horrible things that went on, the terror that white people caused to black people, the lynchings, and I mean, this was a time of Jim Crow. And our leaders, Governor Aycock, just insisted that white people were superior to black people. And I think that just sends a bad message. You know, we want to be an inclusive community, and that statue does not represent inclusivity. In fact, I think it could be a detriment to the recruitment of new jobs and businesses to this community. So I would favor a commission to study how to move it, who should pay for it, where it should be moved. Lots of issues associated with moving a statue, and it needs to be done lawfully, but then come back to the Board of Commissioners and make a recommendation. Thank you.
Continue on those lines. One of the issues with the statue is the amount that is costing the sheriff department to basically patrol the statue when there are marches and protests. Again, the amount of salary it is costing the sheriff department, which of course, you are in control of that budget. Also with the city of Graham, which you don't have any control of, but it's also costing the city of Graham. If the sheriff comes to you and says that because of the increased patrolling of the statute and other issues going on with the statute, he needs a raise in his budget for that, would you then, first of all, would you give the increase to the sheriff, and would you then look at taking the statute down for those who do not wish to take the statute down? We're starting with Mr. Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. So, budgeting is a tricky thing. Just because you need some additional expense in one area doesn't mean you have to increase the overall budget because you need to look for cuts in other areas. It's really a question of priorities. I mean, I believe that we need to protect our right to free speech, but we need to make sure that our people are going to be safe in the process of exercising that right to free speech. So I don't know how else to answer the question, so I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Mr. Paisley. Thank you, Mr. Byrd.
The sheriff's budget is very important, and one of the primary things that county commissioners are required to do is set the budget each and every year. It has to be completed and in place by June the 30th, and we start budget hearings typically in April and May of each year. If Terry Johnson came to me and said, we need further funds or additional funds because of the statute, then one, I would want to talk to Terry Johnson, our high sheriff, and determine what those needs are. What are the expenses and how great would the budget need to increase? Those are things that I think we need to listen to our officials, in this case, an elected official, the high sheriff of Alamance County. I would consider that, and I cannot tell you whether I would increase the budget or not, because there's so many other needs in addition to that are the county commissioner's concern. And we've got to have a tax base that's reasonable. We've got to have safety, and all those are primary issues, but we'll also have to fund our schools and do other things with all those funds. I would listen to Sheriff Johnson carefully and then make the decision as to increasing or not increasing the budget.
Ms. Thompson.
Well, when I used to do prevention in middle school, 8th grade, about domestic violence, healthy relationships, and brought the sexting initiative, you haven't seen fear on a teenager's face. You say, let me see your phone, because no mother or father wants to think their child would ever make that step, but they will, because that's just sometimes unfortunately part of growing up. And the thing about that is you have to always be prepared for the what ifs. And I look around and I see that teenagers never think there's a later. I always say you're building your resume for life. Trust me, it'll catch up with you sooner or later. But at the same time, with law enforcement, Parks and Recreation, DSS, everything, you can't live on your highs. You have got to have a balance, and you've got to always have that in case. We had a alleged sniper the other year out of Eastern. Law enforcement had to be pulled there, which means they have to be pulled away from other things. And you've always got to have yourself covered no matter what. That's police, that's sheriff, that's anything. And so as far as needing more money, I'm going to always base my decisions on the side of safety, because every life in this county is priceless. And you can't put money in a life. There's just no comparison. But you got to really think about the laters, because I've always said with school shootings, when I got live shooter drills training last year and the year before, I said, it's not what if, it's when. And we've got to act like we know if that ever happens, we're going to be ready for it. And as long as you've got unrest like this, you got to be smart and you got to be prepared for it. But you just can't think you're going to need the extra bam one time, because you're not. But you've got to really think ahead and plan for that. And then just because you get money don't mean you have to spend it all. And that's why discernment and good understanding with budget and money comes. But I'm going to always support safety no matter what.
So for my experience, I think looking at the budget is a critical responsibility of a commissioner, one of the main responsibilities. And so whether it's the sheriff or any other type of department, I want to look critically at what the request is, what the need is, why this request is being made, and are there other alternative creative solutions. I mentioned earlier I work in a nonprofit, all we do is creative solutions to try to find money to move around or ways to get things donated or adjusted. But I think in terms of what we're talking about with the sheriff, I do think we have to be careful about the perception of the sheriff's office for people of color, that increasing surveillance in a place like downtown Graham may make people feel uncomfortable, unsafe, unwelcome, just like it may make other people feel safe and welcome. And I think that reality is there and must be acknowledged at the same time. So just, I think like the other folks have said, really understanding where this need is coming from. Are there alternative options? Are there ways that we can inform community of other types of solutions that we can pursue to make sure that we're spending our county dollars as wisely as possible, especially when so many other areas are in desperate need, particularly during this pandemic, when places like the health department, social services, and the schools need investing and funding as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. When we're talking about quality of life, we're, of course, got to include living wages and the salary in this area. Starting with you, Ms. Thompson, what can we do to attract new industry to this community, an industry that pays a good living wage and salary to citizens of this county?
Well, I'm all about corporations coming here and like UPS, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And, but a certain level of education is going to have to be required for that. And that's a high-paying job. I've talked greatly about wanting to bring a great wolf lodge here. I really want to cater and really make things attractive for all ages in our county. And somewhere like a great wolf lodge has all different kinds of level of working as it is. I think you really need to get paid for the job that you do, and the more you do your job, the better you get, the more you go up the ladder. I can't ever see paying someone a wage that they have no experience, they're just starting out, but I can't ever see how anyone on minimum wage is ever going to get out of poverty. I've never been in that position, but I know just from clients I've worked with, it's day to day. What am I going to do? And that many times leads to crime because you got somebody barely making money or they're not working at all and they want to mess around with drugs or something like that. There's quick money, but there's also a serious consequence that's going to start you on a road you do not want to go to. So I think people need to make good money, but they also need to do a good job and be well trained to do that. Being on the Board of Education, that is your key. If you want it, it is there. There are so many pathways to a great education, and our school system needs to get you on that pathway. So I'm all about bringing different things in this county that are different, all kinds of jobs that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to start out on day one, because you're building a person from the inside and out and growing them to become a successful adult.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Paisley?
That's a wonderful question. First off, we've got to have industry in order to bring in good jobs and good paying jobs. The UPS facility that's coming into Alamance County will in fact do that. And I think the figures I saw, average salary is going to be $60-some thousand, which is really good for Alamance County as a beginning salary. At the same time, when I was a county commissioner, we did bring in a number of industries into this county, and they were successful into bringing in not just jobs, but jobs that paid good salaries, and I think that's extremely important. We've got to take care of industry, but we've got to take care of two other things to do that. One, our farms. There are so many farms now that are just going out, farmers that are going out of business. So we've got to protect those individuals, and we've got to protect our educational system and promote it. ACC can just provide so much good education. And through all my 35 years of competitive hot air balloon flying, I've been all over the country and watched other communities to see what they did. Several of the communities brought in education, Elon University, ACC, the school system here, private schools, public schools, doesn't matter, and worked together with industry to provide for jobs and for good paying jobs. And we can do that in Alamance County. Tried to do that in the 1 year that I was a county commissioner, and I couldn't get the other commissioners to buy in. I hope and pray that I'll be successful in doing that so that we can bring education, our individuals, our people, young and old, doesn't matter, and our industry, and bring in more industry to provide more jobs and better jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Paisley. Mr. Byrd?
Thank you, Mr. Graves. So when I was on the Board of Commissioners, I was a strong proponent of offering economic incentives to bring good paying jobs, career type jobs to this community. And so that's so very important. And all those jobs were really, they paid well. But also to attract those good paying jobs, we need to make sure we have a strong system of public education. That is just key. And that includes Alamance Community College as well as ABSS. You know, you think about having a strong education system so that we will be training people, educating people to take on those really good jobs because it takes a lot of skills and education to meet the needs of these companies that are coming in. And just think if everybody all of our kids went through our school system, had a great education, went on to graduate and get something beyond graduation from high school like at ACC, get a good job, and now all of a sudden affordable housing isn't an issue anymore because people have the income to be able to afford good housing. So there's so many benefits to bringing in jobs, but really a necessary ingredient for that is to make sure we have a strong system of education where every child, regardless of skin color or zip code, can really be successful in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Ms. Powers?
I think the question about bringing in jobs, one thing I'd like to see us focus more on is the jobs that in businesses that already exist here, the small businesses, the entrepreneurs, whether it's Gigi's Cupcakery, Knick Knack Shack, Guzman's Market. These are all small businesses that employ a lot of people in the community. And I think we need to continue the investment in growing small businesses, growing farms. You know, I have a friend who runs Miles Family Farm, and he talks about the challenges he faces, even though his family's farmed for a long time. He finds difficulty accessing capital and resources and investment in his farm, and he really wants to grow it, but is just finding a lot of barriers. So I want to try to explore what the county can do to work with the chamber, work with Alamance Community College to expand that. But I think we also have to look at our infrastructure here. It doesn't mean much to have a living wage job if you can't get to it, if you don't have transportation. We have Link, which is awesome, and we have ACTA, but those aren't really great options if you need to go somewhere last minute, if your car breaks down. I think we need to look at the whole system of how people maintain steady, reliable income. And at the county level, too, we can invest in living wages as well as one of the largest employers in Alamance County. The living wage is estimated to be around $11 an hour in Alamance County. So I think Bob has talked to me about this before, auditing the jobs and making sure every single county employee from ABSS to the sheriff's office to DSS is getting that living wage floor at the very, very minimum, and that we should always excel to make sure our county employees are treated with the best wages and best benefits for the work that they do to make this place such a great place to live.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Paisley, a lot of people don't realize agriculture is really big in Alamance County. And two of the candidates referred to family farms. What can you do to help support family farms?
There are a number of programs that are already in existence here in the county. And through the farm services, all kinds of different programs already exist. We need to look into further programs that will assist farmers. I grew up on a tobacco farm and priming tobacco. If anybody ever tells you that they wore short sleeves priming tobacco, believe me, they never worked in tobacco because the gum does not come out of your hair and so without just super strong soup. But having been there and done that, and having raised livestock and so forth, I know that our farms are extremely important. We've got to eat. We want good, healthy food. We'd like for it to be local, and we need to have additional programs to continue to support farms. There are various programs you can set aside farms now for farming only. You can get tax deductions under our current system if the farm is dedicated to farming. There are all kinds of programs that already exist, but we need to expand those to help our farmers.
Thank you, Mr. Paisley. Mr. Byrd?
Thank you. So when I was on the Board of Commissioners, I attended just about every agriculture board meeting and got familiar with the farm preservation programs. And so this is a program where farmers are paid a certain amount of money if they guarantee that their farms will in perpetuity be farmland. And so that's one way of preserving farms. We have a different tax system for farmers for active farms, the present use value system, which results in a lot lower tax base so that they can hopefully be more profitable. So I think that we need to make sure that we have the supports in place for farmers, such as the Cooperative Extension Service, the Water and Soil Conservation Board, so that they can be helping farmers be more successful as well. So those are some of the things that we can do to preserve farms and to help them. And one issue, too, is land use planning. You know, we have a lot of farmers tend to sell their properties and they're developed for subdivisions or maybe for industry. So that's one of the objectives of the Farm Preservation Program, to prevent that from happening. But another way to be able to do that is making sure that we have land use planning and have some teeth in that. And I really think that we need to go through a process, and it's already being done to some extent, but to look at zoning so that we can protect our farms that way. Thank you.
Ms. Powers.
In regards to zoning and planning, if you haven't already, please go to the planning department's website. They're looking for feedback on the current land development plan, including a snow camp area, small area review. So if you want to have input on what that can look like, you can do that there. I think also with the farming, this actually came up at the last county commissioner meeting, is this inheritance of farmland. The average age of farmers is around 55 to 60 years old. And for young people, right now, even though mortgage interest rates are great, buying land is really inaccessible and difficult and cumbersome, especially if you don't come from a farming family, but you want to get into the industry. And even if you do come from a farming family, if you want to pivot, if you want to take advantage of something like hemp, you've got to pivot equipment and resources. So I love the Cooperative Ag Extension at Benevolence Farm. We work with them all the time, supporting our work and making sure that we get our plants in the ground at the right time, that we resolve our pest problems, that our chickens are fed well. And I think we could continue that partnership and expand upon the resources and programs that already exist, but make sure they are accessible to first-time farmers, to young farmers, to farmers of color. Make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to access this industry. It is extremely difficult work, but extremely rewarding, and we obviously can't sustain ourselves without our farmers. So we want to make sure that we can do everything we can to invest in agriculture in Alamance County.
Ms. Thompson, thank you. Ms. Powers.
Growing up in Eli Whitney, I could step out and tell you exactly what was across the street because I had farms everywhere. And also growing up out in Eli Whitney, there were like over 100 farms in Alamance County. Now there are four dairy farms. And it's really difficult to make a lot of money in dairy farms because the big government dairy farms that really milk a lot of cows, that's how it does. My neighbor across the street, Randy Lewis, has had to totally reinvent. He still milks, but he also does ice cream. He does yogurt. He sells his milk to Whole Milk in Chapel Hill. He's had to really become real innovative as a farmer, and he's smart. He's one of the hardest working men I know, but he's really smart. Being on the land development committee, I have really learned a lot about zoning. If we had some serious zoning, we probably wouldn't have a rock quarry problem right now at Snow Camp, and that's a really big issue to me. But I just hope you guys realize that over 17,000 acres now is no longer being farmed in Alamance County. And that means housing developments. That means houses popping up everywhere. And a lot of times people don't want to live beside each other when they're two extremes. And we have to be really careful of that and make sure everybody's got their privacy, but yet they've got their home they've always wanted. The farmers, like Kristen was saying, are really aging out, and their kids are going to college. My best friend and roommate at East Carolina was raised on a dairy farm, and she went to East Carolina, finished up at Carolina, and was an accountant, as the vice president of the Rams Club. She said, I am not milking another cow when I become an adult. And I understand it, but that's a gift, that's a calling, just like being a pastor. And a farmer is like no other. They're the hardest working people, and I'm telling you, we can sell and rerun a building, but if you sell a farm, you're going to get really hungry. So I am big support on farmers and protecting them. They're precious.
Thank you. On this section, we're going to deviate a little bit, so if the timekeeper, each person there has 1 minute to answer the questions, 1 minute for each question, because we have so many questions, and you guys are going to be the leaders of this county, so we need to get as many questions in as possible. This is particularly a long question, so please pay attention. During the 2018 and 2019, we're on education now. During the 2018-2019 school year, the Alamance-Burlington school system ranked number 100 out of 115 in the North Carolina school system in state funding, which is $6,272 per student, and number 51 out of 115 in per pupil funding, $1,881 per student. From local funding, Chapel Hill Carrboro ranks number 1, Orange County ranks number 3, Durham County ranks number 5, Chatham County ranks number 7, Guilford County ranks number 18 in local per pupil funding. As a county commissioner, what would you do to raise per pupil funding for the school system? What would you do specifically, starting with Mr. Byrd?
Well, thank you for that question. It's a big question because the balancing act is that we need to make sure that we're funding our schools properly while maintaining a reasonable tax rate to do that. So when I was a commissioner, and I would say this currently too, I don't know that there's ever been, at least in recent history, a commissioner that was a bigger champion and supporter of our public education system. So it's just really important that we fund the needs that for our schools. And the strategic plan that the school system has is designed to prioritize where we need to spend that money. You know, there's 5 strategies. One deals with school compensation, and one deals with teacher supports, and one deals with facilities. And so we need to target the money that we have so we get the biggest bang out of what we spend. But yes, we need to do a better job at funding our schools, most definitely.
Ms. Powers.
Yes, so I think investment in the schools needs to come from listening to the school board, listening to the people who are on the ground every single day, making sure that their needs are met. As a commissioner directly responsible for the state of the school buildings, that was the #1 thing we heard in our survey over and over. We may not be thinking about school buildings right now, but when kids go back, we need to think about, and teachers and staff, are they going to the healthiest, safest school buildings that they possibly can? So how can we use our county dollars to invest and make sure that we're maintaining our schools, because we know when things break because of neglect, a lot more expensive to fix. So we need to make sure we're careful with our funding that way and invest now for schools in generations to come.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson.
8 years. It's been really frustrating because I see what we need and it's not there. You hear no a lot and you just can't accept it. I'm a firm believer that we need to bring things here that will bring other people here, that will spend money here. That way we don't lay everything on the back of our current taxpayers. We've got to do better with our everything we've got in our schools, healthier buildings, stronger buildings, and keep them that way and not neglect them. We've had years where we just couldn't do it, and we didn't, and we're really paying for it 10 times now. So I think balance when it comes to running a business is so important, and also having the right people in the right place, in the right position, so they can squeeze every bit of, you got to get a dime out of a nickel in everything you do. Working for nonprofits, Kristen will tell you that, myself as well. So I just think you have to have the right people in the right positions, and you got to know how to spend your money where it matters and then where it's going to be the most effective on our school. And our teachers, we're number 10 in the supplement in the state, and we've really worked hard for that, and we always need to work harder because that is a strong incentive to get the best of the best to be standing in front of our kids in a classroom. That is everything.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Paisley.
Thank you. When I was a county commissioner, I did attend many of these school board meetings and so forth. We've got to have the school board and the county commissioners work much, much closer together. The county commissioners an amount of money based upon the budget presentation that the school board gives to the county commissioners at budget time. The county commissioners cannot control that money. It goes to the school board, and the school board many times uses it for exactly what they said they would, but many times would not use it for that roof at Southern High School, for example, or some other need that they were begging for money for. I think the county commissioners and school board must work much more closely together.
Okay, before I get to this other loan question, would you be in favor raising taxes in Alamance County if it meant making sure that our schools were taken care of? 1 minute.
That's the who?
That's starting with Mr. Paisley.
Oh, thank you. The short answer is yes. If it meant making a difference in our school systems and so forth, yes, we need to allot to the school system the money that they need. They will present those needs to us in the budget that they bring to the commissioners every single year. At the same time, we don't need to waste money, and we need to be utilizing that money for the best needs of the children and of the schools. But the short answer is yes, if the need's there. Now, with our sales tax, by the way, much more came in for sales tax than was predicted last year. And so the income for the county is up dramatically beyond what they thought it would be. So we have additional monies that the new commissioners are going to be looking at and utilizing, and part of that hopefully will go to the schools. Thank you.
We do have a question about the sales tax question. We do have a question about that. Mr. Byrd,
Would you repeat the question one more time?
would you be willing to raise taxes if it meant to improve the quality of our schools?
So my attitude on taxes is that the short answer is yes, but with some conditions. First of all, before we raise taxes, we need to make sure that we've exhausted all opportunities to cut expenses and exhausting all opportunities to find other revenue sources like sales tax increases or just the increasing in the tax base. But we need to make sure that we are meeting our needs, and especially for the schools, because that is so fundamental for everything else. But the other caveat too is that I want to make sure that our tax rate is reasonable and comparable to other counties. So I'm not in favor of having the lowest tax rate in the state just for the sake of having the lowest tax rate, but I don't want to have the highest tax rate either. So we need just to look at other counties and make sure that we're reasonable about our tax rate.
Ms. Powers.
I would echo the previous folks in saying yes as well. And I think that I understand and have heard from voters too about the burden that increased taxes can have on their livelihoods. And I would want to make sure that any decision we make as a county commissioner is going to have collateral consequences, going to have unintended consequences. And sometimes it's just a part of making a hard decision. So I want to make sure that we can connect people to the resources they need based on these decisions. And I think schools, education teachers should be one of the most prestigious and well-paid positions out there. And unfortunately, it's not the case. And I don't know how long it will take to get to that point where we have a culture of funding teachers and staff for what they're worth and all they invest in our community. But I hope we can get there sooner than later.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Ms. Thompson.
Well, we just had a tax increase, and now we've got a $150 million bond, and people sometimes think grants are magical money, and they just like, wow, but they are tax dollars. There is no free money, nothing to it. And I will do whatever I have to do to make sure every child has everything they need, and possibly everything they want as well, because I want them to have the life they deserve. But whenever you get tax increase, and then you get a bond, you have to take that money and you have to honor that money. And you have to spend that money like you're never getting another dime to make it as profitable and prosperous as possible. And you also want your county to see what you've done with that money. So if you ever have to do that again, they will trust that you're going to use that money wisely.
Okay, Ms. Thompson, we're going to start off with you. Thank you for that answer. Due to the anticipated decline in sales tax revenue, the county commissioner started fiscal year with reduced funding to various departments in the school system. Based on better than expected sales tax revenue, the county manager recently recommended at the commissioners' meeting on October the 19th that commissioners release funding for the sheriff department, the health department, and the school system facilities, which they currently received $1.2 million out of the $3.3 million agreed upon in its capital improvement plan with the county. The commissioners agreed to release funding for the sheriff department and the health department, but not the school system. How would you have voted on that issue? I'm sorry, Ms. Thompson.
Okay, did you say they released money for the school and then they didn't release money for the school?
No, they are currently receiving 1.2 million of the 3.3 million that was agreed upon, but they did release money for the sheriff department and the health department, but not the school system.
Well, I know all agencies have had to take a cut because I think that's fair, not one or the other. I know I've talked to different leaders in the community with different agencies, and they always say, well, look at us. They tell us every year we got to make cuts because you just have to. You have to be fiscally sound. And also you got COVID, the biggest invisible monster ever that's affecting everything, our businesses, closing, partially closing. Lord have mercy, we're out of school. It's just a hot mess. And so whenever we have a situation like that, I think we all need to be responsible and do our part because one can't get more than the other and one can't be ignored like the other because we're in the kid business. We're in the safety of kid business and they're all connected and we have to work as a team. Sometimes we have to sacrifice, but sometimes you just got to play hardball and do what the numbers tell you you've got to do. Brian Haygood is a smart guy. He knows his finances. So does Jeremy Teeter. We are blessed to have both of them, and I trust them. If that's what they tell me, I'm going to believe what they're telling me until they prove me different.
Ms. Powell.
I think we have a prime opportunity, as I said, especially with kids not always in the school buildings right now, to invest in our education, to make repairs and adjustments to our buildings for when people go back full time. And I think we're missing the mark in terms of investing in education that way. From what I understood at the county commissioner meeting, the sheriff's budget had already been allocated. That was money they had budgeted for. It was just a matter of being cautious about not knowing what COVID was going to do to the community. But I definitely agree and very much support the nurses' investment. I mean, one of my close friends is a nurse, and she's the communicable disease coordinator at Alamance County Health Department, and she is so overworked. And we need to. I mean, nurses are again another profession that should be held in high regard and invested in. So I'm glad to see the health department got the funding that they needed.
Mr. Byrd, thank you, Ms. Powell.
Well, thank you. So I think that we need to make sure that our priorities are set. And I don't like to hear that the school system wasn't funded where the sheriff's department and the health department were. Now, I know our staff in county government are way behind the marketplace in their salaries, so I'm sure some adjustments were needed there. But at the same time, we need to make sure we're supporting our schools. Now, what the way this works is that it's up to the school board to determine what the funding needs are, and then it's up to the county commissioners to provide the funding. And that requires some trust between the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners. And sometimes I sense there isn't that trust. We need to make sure that both boards are working on the same team, working together to make sure our kids are getting the right education that they need. And it's just like any team, different members have different roles and responsibilities, and team members have to hold each other accountable. But I think there needs to be a better working relationship between the two boards, and we need to follow the lead of the Board of Education when funding our schools.
Mr. Paisley, thank you, Mr. Byrd.
Thank you. I am currently on the Recreation and Parks Board. I'm currently on the ACTA Board, in fact, Vice Chairman of that board. And I've been on the numerous other boards here in this county throughout my 46 years of practicing law and raising a family. Each and every one of those took drastic cuts with the budget that was passed this past year. Recreation and Parks, for example, we had to cut out because we didn't have the funding for all youth sports. What a tragedy. Now, all those things need to be restored with the sales tax increase. Hopefully, when 3 of the candidates here will be county commissioners, when we start looking at our budget in the spring of the year, we've got to provide for the school system and all those others that took such drastic cuts previously.
Last question about education. Do you think the capital improvement budget for the school system is adequately funded? And we'll start with Mr. Byrd.
Well, I would say that the $150 million bonds are adequately funded because that's what the 7 of the 8 cents tax increase was for in this past budget year. But the $150 million is not adequately funding all of the capital needs of our school system. That bond issue took care of our high schools, most of the needs of the high schools, probably not all. But it only touched 2 elementary schools, and it didn't touch the rest, and it didn't touch any of the middle schools. So we have some tremendous capital needs I remember going through the process when I was on the Board of Commissioners, and we looked at all these different scenarios about what the needs really were, and getting it down to $150 million, which was what the target was, because that's what everybody thought the voters would approve, was a tough task, and a lot of things were kind of cut out of the projects. Thank you.
Mr. Paisley?
$150 million bond issue was tremendous, and it's obviously helping the school system. And Ms. Thompson, thanks for what you did to utilize that money. And they're doing that with the new high school, some assistance to the elementary schools and so forth. I think we have to look at the budget this coming spring as new county commissioners, if I'm lucky enough to be elected, and make sure that we fund the schools adequately, but not at the same time undercut other agencies and other needs.
Ms. Thompson?
Well, we just we're upfitting all the high schools, adding on to them, building a new high school. I've never seen so many zeros. And then 2 elementaries, they're getting added on too, because Mad-Ben is outgrowing the United States of America. And I'm not kidding you. But the thing of it is some of them schools are older than me, and that's dirt. And so we've got to really look at stuff like that. But if you take care of what you got, old is still good as long as it's in well shape, it's healthy, and it's clean. We paint 6 schools every summer. That's another, but I'm telling you, paint is big. You just want your teachers to walk in and go, yeah, they want to be excited about their school. But you got to take care of what you got and be real diligent. When somebody calls in a work order, do it then. And we've had issues of that a long time in the past, not with Dr. Thorpe. He's on it because I call him constantly. But you have to take care of what you got and just get every dime out of you can, because money's hard to come by when it's year after year after year. You have to build that trust with your people and your community.
Ms. Powers?
Earlier this year, the superintendent invited all the commissioner candidates to meet with him to better understand the needs of ABSS. And one of the questions I had asked was, how much approximately do you think the school system needs to maintain the capital improvement, to maintain our investment in school infrastructure? And he said at the moment it's about $7 million increase per year, and that we have a goal of getting, and I'm going to forget the exact term, but it's like a 1% interest or reinvestment rate, and we're at 0.4%. So we have some ways to go to improve the increase in funding there. So I would follow the lead of the superintendent and the school board. If they say they need about $7 million more, that seems like a real good investment to make sure our school buildings are safe and healthy long term, and that they don't lead to larger, stickier, more expensive problems down the road.
Okay, I think we got time for 2 more questions. Starting with Mr. Paisley. Would you support the land development plan draft, and especially the small area plan for snow camp? Will you support option A, which provides a more immediate small area zoning plan for snow camp, or make us wait for as much as 2 years for a countywide plan?
That's an interesting question. I think all that will have to be studied. I'm somewhat familiar with both plans. I'm not sold on either plan at this point. We've got to protect our farmers. We cannot just go in and decide, hey, you can't have a dairy farm, for example, or whatever, because of the smell and the other things. There are county regulations now that protect farmers to some degree, but not as fully as we should. I would have to study that issue before I could fully answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paisley. Mr. Byrd?
Thank you. I did look at the option A for the snow camp small area zoning, and that looks very reasonable, and I appreciate the fact that that's something that could be implemented more quickly than a whole county-wide zoning, because that's going to require a whole lot more study and a lot of stakeholders being assembled to figure out just what kind of zoning we want in each of the areas around the county. But this could serve as a model for other parts of the county that would help to facilitate the establishment of more small area zoning plans. When I first heard about small area zoning plans, I was a little bit skeptical. It just seems like we need some teeth put into our land use planning across the whole county. But if this is a way to help us get there, and if this is what the people in Snow Camp want, and it looked very reasonable to me, there's 4 categories of zonings, then we should probably go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Ms. Powers?
So I think we all value people who own property being able to do what they want for their property, but we also want good neighbors and to be a good neighbor. And as of now, the problem is that there are businesses trying to manipulate that good neighbor mentality in our regulations, like the snow camp mine. So this land use plan, I think, offers a good, particularly with the snow camp area plan, a short-term solution to add extra protection in addition to the revised HIDO, the Heavy Industrial Development Ordinance, to protect areas like snow camp that are vulnerable to exploitation by businesses. I think snow camp could be a really great case study for that, and I'd be curious how it could lend, as folks have said, to a larger study of a more comprehensive plan that, again, allows people to enjoy their land and their homes, but also allows us to be good neighbors to one another and to be respectful and not exploitative of the communities and land that we have here in Alamance.
Ms. Thompson, thank you.
I went through rezoning with the school system, big. And anytime you're moving stuff like that, it's cool, everybody needs it, but don't touch my property. And you're going to find that same resistance in anything we do because it represents change. You have to look at stuff like this so you don't have another quarry, and you have to look at things to where it is, because I want the quarry to be successful, but you can't help where the rock is. You got to look at that. And you got to have safe buffers, and not just this. I mean a real buffer where it looks like you can't even tell it's there. But you have to really work together, because this is people's land. This is not our land, and they need to be brought in everything. We had meetings all over the county with this to talk to people, but it's like rezoning, just a handful show up, but then the whole world gets mad about it. So we all have to get involved and play ownership, because we are the owners of our land, and make sure we know every aspect of what's going to be happening. You have to be prepared.
Again, because we got so many questions, we're going to try to, if you can, answer these questions in 30 seconds, if it's possible. We won't
That's a yes or
We
no.
won't mute your mic if, you go over, but please, in the essence of time, 30 seconds. What would your plan be for supplying water to snow camp residents should their only source of well water be contaminated by the permitted quarry or by a pipeline breach, such as a 300,000-gallon pipeline leak in Huntersville, North Carolina? Ms. Thompson.
Oh my goodness, that's a long line and a long line of money if you think you're going to run water lines out there. The way I look at that is we can't think about what we're going to do if everything messes up later. We need to think about that now. That's why zoning is important, so you don't have these problems, that you don't have to create disasters and then fix disasters. So as far, that's a biggie. I don't have a wand.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Powell. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Ms. Powell.
And I agree that we definitely do need to put protections in place, because it will be very expensive. You know, if unfortunately this quarry does get implemented, the county did approve this plan and the state will have approved it. So I do think it's a dual responsibility between the county and the state to make sure that folks out there have access to water. If we have to even truck it in, whatever it takes to make sure people, because that's a human right, is access to safe and healthy, clean water. So I think that would be a responsibility of both the county and state, since they let the quarry enter the community.
Thank you. Mr. Paisley.
Water obviously is essential, and we must provide water. But as an attorney, I know that if the quarry, for example, if it's implemented and it contaminates water, they can be sued, and they can be made to pay those costs for the bringing water in, or for bringing the utilization of water systems and all kinds of things. So there's more than just, hey, can the county pay for it? We need to look at external sources of income for that, such as the quarry itself, if they contaminate the water.
Mr. Byrd.
Well, I would agree that we need to hold accountable any of the organizations that had a complicit factor in the contamination of the water. That would include the pipeline people and the quarry people, if that were the case. And I agree with bringing the lawsuits to hold those people accountable. But in the meantime, I think that we as a county permitted the quarry, and I guess probably somebody had to permit the Colonial Pipeline coming through our community too. So I kind of looked to Flint, Michigan, and what we have, what was done there, and making sure that everybody had water, whether it was bottled water or some other form of water. I mean, I just think we have a responsibility to serve our community, and then we can take care of the legal matter later on.
Since we're running out of time, just a quick yes or no. Did the county handle the COVID crisis well? Yes or no? Starting with Ms. Powers.
The health department, yes.
Okay, Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Health Department, I agree, yes.
Okay.
The health department, yes. The Board of Commissioners, I'm not so sure.
Well, real quick, the ones who said the health department, yes, who is no? The county commissioners, the jail, who are you saying didn't handle it well? A quick name, Mr. Byrd.
Well, I don't think the way the Ace Speedway situation was handled, that wasn't handled well at all, and it wasn't because of the health department.
Okay, Mr. Paisley.
First off, that was governed by the governor of the state of North Carolina, Governor Cooper. It was not governed by the county commissioners. I know that one of the county commissioners, Ms. Galey, did write a letter, but that's not in the purview of the county commissioners.
But the responses of each department is in the purview of the county commissioners and the head of those departments. So is there any departments that didn't handle it well?
I think most handled it well. I'm on two of the boards now, and we wore masks, and we took preventions, and we, with the ACTA, for example, we took great care to every single hour, you spray the buses and take that action necessary. And being on that board, I know they did a tremendous job. And most of the people with ACTA are in wheelchairs or older people. They're not people that can walk to the link bus system, for example.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Thompson.
Well, I'm just going to say, you asked if the county did, which means they got a lot of little kids underneath them that they manage. Same with school board. When a child hurts their hand out of the school, I get sued, not anybody else. So whatever happens under my leadership is on me.
Okay.
So I started that trend because I really do think the health department, they're public health officials, they've studied this, they have masters in this. Whatever we say, I honestly would be like, okay, but what does the health department say? So I appreciate all that they've done, and I think the presentation of leadership at the county level in terms of the commissioners was subpar to me in terms of representing the values and the recommendations put forth by the health department.
All right, this is our closing question. They do get 2 minutes for the closing question. Unfortunately, because of national unrest, the local issue of the statue on the in the news, national newspaper, our county is not always presented in the best light that I think this county is and can be. I don't think the county commissioners have done a great job in presenting the better side of Alamance County. If you are elected, what would you do to better bring a better awareness of the county, what Alamance County could be? Starting with Mr. Byrd, and this is your closing argument as well. Closing statement.
This is the closing statement?
This is the closing statement.
Well, my view, my vision for the county is for Alamance County to be the place where young people will want to settle, raise their families, and have successful careers. An inclusive community that is free of biases and prejudices so that everybody has an equal opportunity to be successful. And to do that, we need to make sure we have a good, strong public education system and be known for that. I mean, if you look at the vision of the school system, I was on the vision plan committee and helped to draft the language, but to be a national model for our curriculum and community involvement. So that would help with our reputation. But I think in dealing with some of the unrest that we have, it comes down to heart of people. So I've been a student of racial equity for the past 4.5 years. And the first time I went through the Racial Equity Institute 2-day Phase 1 training, that was transformational for me on how I view race and racism, and especially systemic racism. And it gave me an understanding of how profound racism and systemic racism manifests in our community in such profound ways. So that transformation for me, I'd like to see everybody go through that. Everybody in county government, all elected officials, And it's more than just going through a 2-day program because, you know, for me it's a journey, and I think for other white people especially, it's going to be a journey as well. It's being a student, it's reading articles and being in roundtable discussions and being close to people that don't look like me, being close to black people and other people of color, in caucuses and watching documentaries and reading books. And there's just a wealth of materials out there so that we understand how our prejudices, which we all have as white people, and biases and this notion of white superiority, where that came from. And thank you.
Mr. Paisley.
First off, I do not agree that all white people are racist. I grew up in a small community in McLeansville, North Carolina, just over the county line, raising tobacco, working in my grandfather's grocery store. When we played ball, we didn't care who you were. We didn't care whether you were any color, any race, any religion. We all got together and we played baseball in the pasture beside the house that I grew up in. And we all played together. We did well together. My freshman year of high school is when integration started in Guilford County, and I did not see any discrimination for anyone regardless of color, race, or creed. Now, I think there is discrimination that goes on. I think that is terrible. I believe that should be overcome. I think we've got to get together, and Mr. Graves, you do a lot of organizing and bringing people together, but Judge Brown, for example, has attempted to do that. We've got to bring all people, races, religions, and whatever together and solve some of these problems. We don't need to be calling names with each other. It needs to be like what it was when I was playing baseball in the pasture beside my house, and we'd have 15, 20 kids there every Saturday and Sunday. We've got to return to that and work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paisley. Ms. Thompson.
Well, this is hard for me because I see the pain on both sides of people's faces. And anger is a first sign of it. Bitter is a sign of it. And I'm a Christian, and the devil plays us with distractions. He lays it on. You know, I don't believe people that have opposite feelings and interests and things cannot work together. One of my best friends goes to this church. She's African American, and she can't be more politically opposite than me and her. But what we have done together for this school system shows that we are focusing and keeping the main thing the main thing. My pastor says it all the time. I encourage Reverend Drumright when he comes in here next weekend to get that group in church, all of them, because we're seeing generations of kids that have just not been supervised. They've been hurt, they've been harmed, they've been traumatized, and they're just surviving, and that's not good enough for them. So I know we can work together. We just have to work harder than we ever have and get our focus on each other instead of the surroundings.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Ms. Powers.
Yeah, so I think for a really long time, not just the past 4 years, but for generations, policies in government of all levels, you have a community that's expansive as this, but the policy directly benefits a much narrower population. And when that happens over generations and over time, people feel unheard, they feel left out, they feel like their humanity is being denied, and that makes people upset and angry. And that is what I think we're seeing a lot of these cracks come out in society, these unrooting of these systemic issues that people are directly hurt by, and they're trying to make their voices heard in any way that they can because they felt silenced for so long. So you have an unprecedented opportunity this year as Alamance County voters to decide the future of the county because you have 3 open seats. 3 out of 5 seats are open. So whoever you choose, make sure that it reflects your values because they're going to be leading this county. They're going to have a majority vote, however it swings depending on the makeup. And we could advance a lot of things, and we could include a lot of people in our policies, but we do need to make sure we elect people who reflect your values and what future you want to see here in Alamance County.
Thank you. This concludes our questioning. We want to thank the candidates that showed up. Again, to my left, Ms. Kristen Powers, Ms. Pamela Thompson, Mr. John Paisley Jr., and Mr. Bob Bird. These are our candidates for county commissioner. Thank you for coming. Dr. Coverdon.
each of you for your attendance. Pray that you have a great night. And don't forget, of course, for next week we will have our last forum. If you have not voted, please go out and vote. God bless you. Have a good night.